So guys, obviously the workshop title now is the interactive exploration of the use of restrictive practices. So we're going to use a reflective lens to try and identify more innovative methods to eliminate or reduce the use of restriction. And one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to, I'm going to give you a case study, and it's a true story as well. And it's, I suppose, maybe when you talk to organisations, this is the kind of scenario that they say we tend to use the most restrictive practices around. Now, not every service will have somebody with this level of challenge, because, as Hick would say, in order to provide a service to somebody, you need to be able to do it effectively. And the challenges very often that would accompany somebody with such level of complexity, most services might decide that they wouldn't have the capability of doing that. So this is a story, if you like, about a man who has very complex needs. He's in his mid-20s. He has a severe intellectual disability. He has autism, ADHD, an anxiety disorder. He's non-verbal, and he has perhaps other mental health conditions as well. I would think he is very depressed. I would think he's also suffering with PTSD, mainly because of the amount of restriction and restraint that is used on him. He definitely has been exposed to the trauma of being physically restrained multiple times as well. He lives in an environment that is the nature of the whole environment, and the nature of the client group is that there's a lot of locked doors and things like that for people's safety. But this interactive workshop is going to take you on an experiential journey to challenge and consider approaches and practices by offering challenging questions which will make you consider values, beliefs, cultural responsiveness. I'm hoping it'll engage you in critical thinking that you can use in practice to reduce the use of restrictive practice, particularly with diverse client groups. Sorry, could you please turn your microphone off? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Such as those.
Well, you lived to buy a year. You could have tried it.
Oh gosh, sorry guys. Does anybody know who has their microphone on there that we could ask them to turn it off? Could we ask everyone maybe to turn their microphones off, please? Thank you. Okay, so we're going to work our way through a kind of critical thinking with a big focus on the use of restrictive practices with people with the most complex intellectual disability, mental health difficulties, and those who have been exposed to trauma. This, by the way, is not a real picture of him, okay? And his name isn't really Pat, so please just note that. This is actually an actor as well. So just to introduce you down to Pat, he's a young man with Down syndrome, autism, severe intellectual disability, complex behaviour. He's non-verbal, he has an anxiety disorder. He's in his late 20s and currently he spends most of his time on a swing. Despite being on a soft diet for swallowing difficulties, he has a strong desire for bread, and this poses significant risks. He lives in a house with 4 others with similar conditions. There's a rigid routine in place with 8 staff on duty during the day and 2 at night. Pat has a history of physical aggression towards staff, and this has led to apprehension among colleagues, creating for a challenging kind of work environment as well. The staff have implemented, under the guidance of their restrictive committees and the wider multidisciplinary team as well, they have implemented an environmental restraint, securing the doors to prevent Pat from accessing the bread, which poses a threat to his safety. Additionally, physical restraint is used to remove the bread from him in case he manages to gain access to it. So it would be very fair to say that Pat is in a hypervigilant state. He watches the door where the bread is, and if there's any lapse of the staff maybe getting out the door and not locking it quick enough, Pat will actually push his way through the door and gain access to the bread. The problem is he does it in a way where he pushes all the bread into his mouth, and given that he has a significant swallowing difficulty, obviously this raises serious concerns about him possibly choking at this time, which is why the staff will come in then and physically restrain him to try and take the bread out of his hand, out of his mouth, etc. So again, just using the chat box there, anybody want to kind of just identify some of the concerns that you might have, one about Pat himself and maybe two about the way in which things are being managed. So you can just use the chat box there if you want to. Yeah, so there somebody said will and preference for bread versus risk. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the core of it, that's the fundamental problem there. Absolutely. Is the 4-client house a good match for him? That's a good, very good question. Yeah, it has definitely got a lot of physical space. He's free access to the back garden with the swing, so he can come and go like that as well. The physical restraint is definitely a concern. I would agree with you. Yeah. Kelly then says trying to find more things to stimulate Pat may help distract him and keep him busy. Yeah. Staff, different levels of amount of force used to remove the bread. Yeah, that's another issue, Jarlath. Soft, small pieces of bread may be available freely, bring down his anxiety. Yeah, 100%. Lack of proactive skill building. Yeah, to build awareness of swallowing risks to reduce further our future likelihood of choking. Yeah. Skill teaching, educational support. Yeah, we have to absolutely look at our the way we manage things, because how has he become so obsessed about the bread, you know, etc. Has he a PCP to identify what he likes to do? Spending most of the day on a swing isn't very meaningful, correct? Is he stuffing his mouth in current practice, escalating behaviour as he knows he must be quick? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, guys, you've definitely identified a lot of the key issues there that would be a concern in this situation. So considering so some people there did identify other possible interventions there as well, such as, you know, maybe engaging him better so that he has more things to do, etc. But that actually was one of the very first difficulties there, is people hadn't built that rapport with them. They didn't have a responsive kind of relationship with him, where if maybe they offered him guidance, he would ignore it. And I do believe he was deeply entrenched in an autistic state, and he hadn't, and the staff didn't maybe have the skills to engage him much better. Yeah, education is definitely a good point, Paula. And he has a very significant intellectual disability. But I think the point is, if staff could have engaged with him in a way where actually response, I hope people know what I mean by that, that they actually had a real connection with them, and I don't think they did. So the purpose now of the reflective tool is to try and enhance your knowledge and partnership enhance knowledge and partnership approach with individuals. Sorry, what's going on here now? Reflective lens then. So can you hear me now? Is everything
Yes.
going? Perfect. Okay, well done. Thank you. Thanks for your help there. So we're going to use a reflective lens, and first of all, the lens will reflect on what kind of knowledge do people need to have to provide support, and then how to build a partnership approach with the individuals and how to listen to them, even if they're non-verbal, even if they have a significant intellectual disability. We're going to look at how to engage in value and ethical driven practices. We're going to consider experiential learning to reflect on practices. We're going to look at some of the theories and methods that need to be used in practice as a way of really giving a very deep dive look at the use of our our restrictive practices as well, and also what skills are actually required to make this happen. You've already identified the critical questions there that are really relevant, like why haven't the staff maybe figured out a way to engage the person better? Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you. We can't see the PowerPoint. Sorry now for interrupting you.
At all. Okay, you can see it now, can you?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the knowledge then that people need to have. So I guess one thing they need is to know the legislative framework, and that is important. If they are using restrictive practices, that they really understand that. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to talk a little bit about organisational policy, HICWA regulations, and also I think the really important things as well that people need to understand is, like, firstly, what is an intellectual disability? What's the difference between a mild, moderate or severe or profound intellectual disability? People mentioned education there. So if you were going to educate somebody, what techniques do you need to utilise in order for somebody with the different levels of intellectual disability to take in the information? I've seen people sit and read out documents to somebody with a severe intellectual disability, and you think, I know it's an easy read guide, but have you even considered how many words or what words they understand, or how in actual fact they take in information? And that's really critical because they don't understand language, certainly not at a severe intellectual disability level. But that doesn't mean they can't receive education. They can learn, and there's ways that they do learn. So that is definitely one of the things that staff need to understand. Also, when they can try to connect with somebody, how do they make that engagement with somebody with a significant intellectual disability? How do they build rapport? How do they listen to people? How do they listen to what they do, what they say, what they don't do, what they don't say? So how do they hear all of that as well? Pat has a very, very complex diagnosis. So he's a severe intellectual disability. He's non-verbal. He has an anxiety disorder, which means he quite possibly will engage in obsessive type thinking, and he may escalate very, very quickly when he's out of his depth. So do staff understand, number one, that the only reason Pat is escalating is because he's in a situation he doesn't have the skills or resources to deal with. So do the staff know what skills he doesn't have? Do they know what resources he lacks? And how are they trying to help him to compensate for that? But the big thing is the partnership. Like, they don't know how to listen to him. They haven't built a rapport with them. yeah, I think they've given him free access to the swing. That's great. It helps him probably to regulate to some extent as well. But it's not teaching him anything else. And for example, he doesn't have that ability to engage in a relationship with people where he's responsive to them and they're responsive to him. And that's a really important place for staff to start, is them responding to him and being responsive and learning how to build on connections with somebody very gently, build up that trust, build a rapport, build the listening, build the hearing as well. Also, do they have any understanding or insight into the world from his point of view? He's very shut down. And for a start, somebody already mentioned, like, why don't they just cut the bread into very small pieces and give it to him in a way that he's not at risk of choking? And absolutely, that is, you know, a really, really important way to be thinking about this.
No, we've not. Mike, we're no.
Sorry, can you turn your mic off, please? Thank you. He's not aware of the risks, and he is so traumatized, and I think he's suffering with PTSD as well. And I don't think the staff have recognised that this PTSD has been in part created by the strategies that are used, and the inability to connect with them is created by the strategies that are used as well. So there's a number of things there that staff need to be able to consider if they want to build a partnership relationship with him. Also, how do we use Pat to tell us what he needs? And the staff don't seem to know how to do that. They see it all about the bread and nothing but about the bread, unfortunately, which is contributing greatly to their, I suppose, they're coming down on this on a side of safety. And absolutely, we want them to recognise safety. It's very important. I mean, he could literally die on their watch if they weren't considering that. But what they're not balancing that with is his right to freedom of movement, his autonomy, etc. And they don't have a skill set to balance that. So by adopting a partnership approach, staff could empower Pat to actively participate in managing this risk to life behaviour, while providing compassionate and effective support tailored to his unique needs and circumstances. So there are a number of legal implications, and definitely there's no doubt about it, the staff are looking at this from a legal lens as well. To some extent they are, and to other extent they're not. Like, they're not taking into consideration informed consent. Like, he's not given them consent to restrict his bread in any way, shape or form. That's evident by the way he's deciding or vigilantly observing for opportunities to gain access to the bread. Criminal law and civil law also play a significant role here, particularly in the respect of, you know, we do not have a right to put our hands on somebody without their express consent. We do not have any right to either put anything into or take anything out of their bodies without their express consent. So that is definitely a consideration that needs to be there. Also, he does have rights. He has a right to freedom of movement. He's a right to autonomy. But then there could be the other side of that. There could be litigation, and staff could be seen to be lacking in vigilance or found wanting if anything more serious did happen. HICWA compliance then, I mean, if you look at Regulation 7, 8, 23 and 26, all of those are focused in on looking at alternative ways of supporting somebody, using de-escalation strategies, using building on relationship building, functional assessment, understanding exactly why he is engaging in this very high risk behaviour. Also absolutely balancing risk, but all those underlining things there need to be addressed as well. So the legal implications of using restraint in healthcare settings does emphasise the importance of following established protocols, but we need to look at what the protocols actually say. I mean, I've recently been involved in a situation where somebody's service broke down, and one of the first questions I asked was, what was the guidance and did the staff follow it? And those staff followed that guidance to the letter of the law. Absolutely. But the guidance was wrong. And the guidance repeatedly led to a situation where physical intervention was the course of action according to the guidance. So that was what was fundamentally wrong in that situation. Also, it wasn't getting reviewed, and I think if it was getting reviewed, the first question that should be asked is, did staff do what we asked them to do? And if they did, then they did the right thing. But then we need to say, but then we're telling them the wrong thing, and we need to re-look at that and not repeatedly use guidance that automatically puts us in the use of restrictive practice. We have to accept that if restrictive practice was used, then all of our other strategies failed. And we need to put much more emphasis on those strategies, the proactive strategies, the preventative strategies, and ask ourselves, why did they fail as well? And I guess a failure to do that level of reflection, a failure to really look at it, is a serious failure within the context of providing support to people with complex needs as well. The next lens we need to be considering is values and ethics. And what values does everybody involved have? Does the frontline staff have? Do the MDT have? Which ones do they value the most? So, for example, do they value freedom? Somebody's freedom to move, somebody's freedom to exercise their own judgment? Do they respect or value autonomy, people's right to make their own decisions? Do they value safety? Do they value equality and choice? And how did those things get balanced in the context of the guidance or the preventative and proactive, and also the reactive strategies that are used as well? So, for example, one of the things I noted, so this was a real situation that I was involved in, and the first time I saw the staff actually restraining this man, I was horrified. So much no, and I was a student at the time, so this was a while ago. But I remember running out to the manager and calling him in and saying, you need to get in here now and stop this. Because they didn't listen to me, I was only a student. And to my absolute horror, he came in and helped them to restrain this man. So afterwards, we had quite a heated discussion. Anyone who knows me will know I'm, quite passionate. So what happened was we ended up in this very passionate discussion where he was saying to me that I shouldn't have been trying to prevent an intervention that the staff had decided to use. And I asked him why, and he said because it was a dangerous situation, and they had to make it as safe as possible. And then I added, but actually the danger was that they were restraining a man who was at risk of choking and he had bread in his mouth. So they didn't even recognise the danger of their own use of restrictive practice. So they couldn't see that they had placed this man in a very near-death situation to try and prevent him from gaining access to the bread. Does that make sense? So the very action that they were taking to try and save him was the very action that could have caused and led to his death much more speedily than if he just took the bread himself. So there was no real thinking that through. And the manager did actually, fair play to him, he did step back and say, I see what you mean. With us holding him and him with bread in his mouth, and the stress of all of that for him and him trying to resist and fight back, etc., that it led to a far, far more dangerous situation than if they just said, well, now he's got the bread, we need to try and keep things as relaxed as possible because it's in his mouth, and what we don't want is him to end up choking on it because we have created such a stressful environment around him. So those are things that seriously need to be asked as well when restriction is used, whatever it is, whether it is, you know, trying to stop someone going out of door if they don't have road safety awareness, etc. Like, if we engage in physical restriction at that time, are we likely to get a better outcome than if we don't engage at that time? And we seriously need to think about the 4 principles of the law when we engage, and they are justifiable, reasonableness, proportionality, and time limited. And the big thing about proportionality is we have to ask the question is, when we intervene, is the outcome better? Or when we intervene using this strategy, is the outcome better than if we did not use that strategy? And we have to take that into the context of, look at the damage it's doing to the relationship with the person, between the staff and the service user, because it definitely is a barrier to them building the kind of rapport that they need to build with somebody. What about the psychological risks to the person? The fact now that Pat has PTSD, he's hypervigilant, he's constantly watching, observing for the moment of a lapse in supervision around that door. Then there's the issue of the psychological burden on the staff, because some staff agree with it and some don't. And they're left feeling compromised in terms of their professionalism. You know, you'll often hear staff saying, well, I didn't come into this profession to hinder people and stop them like this or engage in this sort of restrictive practice. That's not what I'm here for. So they feel they lose a sense of their own identity within that context as well as the real burden or the real possibility that somebody could in fact end up getting hurt in the middle of it. So somebody's asked me to repeat the 4 principles. So the 4 principles are justification. In other words, when we intervene, do we have a justifiable reason for it? And have we tried all other reasons? Right. The second one is, well, they're not necessarily in this order, but the next one is necessity. Is it absolutely necessary? Is there anything else we could do, we could consider that would give us a better outcome? The third one is proportionality or proportionate. When we intervene, is the outcome better than if we did not intervene? And remember, you need to seriously consider the psychological impact of using those restrictive practices, as well as the physical risks you run, both to their safety and the physical safety of staff as well. And the last one is it time limited? In other words, is it only for the duration of time that the threat is present? And that's a really important consideration, because sometimes when I talk to staff and review incidences, one of the big things is they know when to go into a restriction or restraint. They're just not so sure about when to come out of it. Does that make sense? they lose sight of what they're there for. And sometimes the restraint actually doesn't stop until the person stops resisting, as opposed to thinking about this being time limited. What is it we were trying to achieve with the restriction and the restraint? Have we achieved it? And the moment it has been achieved is the moment the restriction should stop. I'm seeing some questions coming in here as well. Which pieces of legislation are the principles derived from? Criminal law and civil law is where you will find them. You don't find them in a nice little bundle though, can I say? But it is where it derives from is the law says you can't put your hand on someone without their express consent, but there are legal defences, and some of the defences are self-defence, defence of others, defence of property, not your, but it has to be your own property, necessity, and etc. And when the law looks to determining whether somebody's actions were appropriate, they use, if they've used it, let's say for self-defence, well, that's justifiable, or defence of others is justifiable. Necessity is a little bit tricky because necessity is about, was it really, really necessary? And this is where you need to do a really deep dive with all of your staff. You need to do all that work, your functional analysis, your functional assessments, your functional analysis. You need to have your OT, your speech and language, your multidisciplinary team, all of them putting together their best work there to really, really try and figure out as well whether or not there are other ways that we can do things. So if the question then gets asked, was it right? Then those 4 principles are the principles that the legal system will look at to determine whether the action was right or not. And that's where they come from. Is that all right? Okay, the ethical considerations then are whether we've considered things like autonomy and dignity. Oh, please don't ask me to pronounce could we just say B and beneficence and non-maleficent? Anyway, we've done it now, right? I can never ever get by, but least restrictive alternative, informed consent and communication, monitoring and accountability, and cultural sensitivity. So they're the ethical kind of lens that you need to look at when you are considering whether or not you've done the right thing. And I suppose a debriefing could be a forum for you to really look at all of the ethical issues around this. If you are using debriefing, sometimes what gets mixed up is staff support and a debrief. And actually they're 2 very, very different activities. Staff support should happen within 24 hours, and its only concern should be, how is the staff after this situation, right? How are they feeling? It should be all about them. What do they need right now? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to assist them to get back into psychological control of the situation, where they're able to think about it more professionally, and they won't be able to do that for at least 48 hours. If you give them good psychological support after 24 or within the 24 hours, and that allows them then to engage more professionally in the situation, you get the 2 things mixed up, and staff are going to be defensive, they're going to be hurt, they're going to be angry, and they won't like being questioned. You give them the space and time to get back into a good psychological perspective of what happened. Then 48 to 72 hours a debriefing should occur. It's important as well to support the service user, and also to support them within 24 hours, and find out how they're feeling now as well. And then maybe within 48 hours, maybe try and get their perspective as well of the situation, but separately. For staff support, I would say within 24 hours. Yeah. For a debriefing, 48 to 72 hours later. So a good debriefing then would focus on 4 things. The first is the service user themselves. And sometimes I like to use a little bit of humour in class, you know, so I'll often say to staff, we need to think and consider, what did everyone bring to the party? In other words, when things escalated, that would have happened in a moment. So who was in this moment and what did they bring to the situation? So the first thing I would say is we need to look at it from the service user's perspective. What did they bring? Well, they brought themselves. They brought in Pat's case, his severe intellectual disability, his anxiety disorder, his autism, his attention deficit disorder. That's who he is, and that is who is present in that moment. He brought his PTSD, his anxiety, his hypervigilance, his determination to get bread. That's who came to that moment. He also brought with him his lack of connection with staff, his lack of ability to connect with them, to hear them, etc. For all those reasons. So we should never lose sight of that. That is who this person is. This person who is poorly resourced, who doesn't have everything that he needs to cope better in this situation. And by focusing in on that, then we can also start to think about the first thing from a staff perspective is, did they remember that in this moment? Do you see what I'm getting at? Sometimes staff forget. They forget who they are. They start talking to them. They start giving them loads of instructions, loads of information. It's overwhelming. It's too much for them. They can't take it in. They can't process it. What about the staff? Who are they? Are they staff who are well trained? Are they trained adequately, effectively to support somebody with such complex needs? Do they know and always recognise the complexity of Pat's various different conditions? Do they know what an intellectual disability is, a severe intellectual disability? Do they know the impact of having an anxiety disorder? What about ADHD? Do they know the core symptom sets associated with ADHD? That he is impulsive, that he doesn't have executive functioning skills. He's not thinking things through. He's in a moment right now, this second, where he wants bread and the only thing he wants is bread. Do they recognise all of that? So are they well trained in those things? Also, to think about them, are they regular staff? How long have they been there? What kind of a rapport have they built with Pat? Who took control of the intervention? Who was in charge of it? Who made the decision? Were they the right person to have made the decision? Was it the right call? How did they feel about being involved in that restrictive practice? Did they all agree that it was the right action at that time? Who decided to end it, or how did it end? See, these are all really, really important kind of questions to ask. Were all staff able to maintain a professional distance within that? Did anyone get annoyed? Did anyone start to escalate themselves? Was anyone hurt? How often have those people been involved in restrictive interventions or physical interventions? How do they feel about it? Are they getting adequately supported as well? Are they given the opportunity to talk about the impact it's having on them as well? Then we look at the resources. So that's the next section. That's the third one. Do we have adequate resources? Have we got full multidisciplinary team reports? Do the staff understand those reports? Is there opportunities to sit down and really consider what those reports mean in terms of how the staff should be supporting that service user? Is it informing their thinking? Is it informing their responses to PAT? In other words, have they been given time to seriously reflect on how they should use the information to make connections and provide support to PAT as well? And then the last one then is the environment. You know, is our environment conducive? Like, are we doing the right thing here, locking the bread away? You know, we have a man now who's totally and utterly obsessed and hypervigilant and watching continuously. You know, so how does that become a good strategy? What about the physical intervention? Like, you know, is that not endangering Pat more? But also, is it not increasing his trauma, his PTSD, etc.? So have we got a situation where we're maybe going round in circles? So that would be a good kind of way to reflect. Would anyone like to just comment there on any of that, or if you have any questions on it? No, nobody. Okay. So experiential learning should be designed to prevent the use of restraint and restrictive practice. It should also involve immersing training methods focused on equipping the person themselves with the skills and strategies needed to effectively manage complex behaviours without resorting to physical intervention. The approach emphasises proactive techniques, communication strategies and de-escalation methods to promote a safe and supportive environment. So I think as well, the other thing the debrief needs to do is not just focus on the use of restriction and the decision, but they should go back and look as well and see what led up to it. Reports should be written as part of a timeline. So it should start much earlier and go back to the point in time where Pat was at his calmest, and then look at how he might have escalated and what strategies were employed by the staff at that time to bring him to a calmer place. Did they work? Were they sanctioned strategies, for example? Were they part of protocols? And if so, then we need to revise the protocol. If they weren't, then if staff were using non-sanctioned strategies, then to ask the question why. And sometimes it is because staff think that the written protocols don't work, and that's important to engage with them to find out like the why. Or sometimes it's because of their own stress levels, and they're too stressed out to follow, or they, etc. So we need to very much have our finger on the pulse of staff's levels of stress, because the most likely reason staff can engage, no, that's actually not true, but sometimes one of the reasons staff are engaging in reactive strategies is because of their stress levels. And that is something that organisations can absolutely prevent, is staff being stressed in these environments. I mean, they can't prevent it, but they can certainly do a lot to support staff around it as well. Yeah, Antoinette there is just saying that debriefing can be a word which is, yeah, interchangeable. Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I know we're going to write out to you afterwards, but one of the things we have done is we have put a 6-part series online for it's an organizational toolkit to help them to reduce the use of restrictive practice. So module 1 looks at what it is. Module 2 looks at the law, so you'll find out all about the various aspects of the law, criminal law, civil law, the defences, the principles of, and you can use that as a really good guide to inform your debriefing as well. There's one on data-driven approaches, which is about using all of your data to make sense of it and to make sure it's informing your strategies. There's another one on debriefing, and it takes you through a whole debriefing on how to do it, even right down to what questions to ask, how to set your debriefing agenda, how to prepare staff for it in advance as well, so that they can engage in it in a professional way. And it also gives you a toolkit on how to monitor all of your use of restriction as well. The whole pack costs like less than €140, and it's really good for frontline staff. They don't need the full kit, they only need 3 modules, and I think that's around €80 or something like that. But it definitely could be something that would be well worth thinking about, to give your whole organisation a good toolkit to focus on how to reduce all uses of restriction. I mean, we're looking at a very high level end here, but you know, there's a lot of low level stuff being used as well, and one of the biggest ones that are used actually is the coercive stuff, and a lot of times staff don't even realise they're using it, you know, and that's the one that is serious, because it often isn't reported and therefore it's not monitored. So the whole toolkit goes from all of that right up to this much higher level of physical intervention as well. But the other thing that I notice as well is that sometimes teams who engage in the use of physical intervention, they practice the physical intervention skills, which I find shocking, because what they don't do is practice the earlier skills, like the listening skills, like the hearing skills, like the engagement skills, the building rapport skills, the how to gain trust skills, how to use empathy, how to use, but they're not practicing them, they're not highlighting them, they're not spelling them out and thinking about how they could have used those in situations either. Yeah, other things the experiential learning could focus on is like, you know, are people getting physically injured in these, the person themselves, whether it's low level skeletal stuff like, you know, bruising or redness or things like that, or whether or not, you know, was there any danger to the person? Like, you know, how vulnerable are they? And we're using, you know, physical intervention. You might know the Tilda study told us shockingly, I mean, I think we were all flabbergasted when we learned that 70% of the people in the Tilda study between 2011 and 2014 had got either osteoporosis, arthritis or osteopenia. And then that's 70%, and if any of them happen to be in physical restraint, how dangerous is that for them as well? Particularly if there's a lot of struggle going on, you know. So to think about things like that. So the use of physical intervention has risks to 3 different body systems. So the skeletal, the cardiovascular, and again, if we look at the Tilda study, it tells us that people with intellectual disabilities are more prone to stroke, TIAs, heart conditions, etc. And the third system is the the respiratory. And again, there's a high prevalence of people with respiratory conditions, COPD, asthma, are prone to chest infections, etc. So there's also a very high percentage of people who are prone to those kind of infections as well. So there's a lot of reasons there why we seriously need to consider the physicality of the use of a physical intervention. But then there's the psychological distress as well. You know, if this is consistently used, it can cause PTSD, it can put people on high level of alertness, anxiety disorders, depression, feeling isolated, embarrassed. Like there's so many different feelings. But then we need to think about them for staff as well. Have we staff who are vulnerable to these things too? Physically or psychologically as well. We need to consider people's loss of autonomy during these times as well, and how is their autonomy protected? Who is their advocate when a restrictive practice is used? Who's the one who's standing aside thinking about it? Who's the one who's deciding it is right, it's not right? We need to stop it now. You know, is there a kind of a focus there around that as well? Also, who's taken into consideration whether or not our strategies are actually inciting increased agitation and aggression? Have we got someone who's able to go, stop, this is the wrong intervention. All this is doing is seriously escalating a situation. And have we got somebody there who's able to do that? And also, who is considering the impact it's having on the relationship with the service user as well? It's very hard to have a therapeutic relationship with somebody if you have physically restrained them. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it absolutely needs to be considered. How are we going to, ensure that we restore the relationship as well afterwards? So the potential risks and adverse effects associated with the use of restrictive practices, and particularly physical intervention, highlights the importance of implementing person-centred approaches, exploring alternative interventions. And again, when we're in debriefing, we absolutely need to be looking at that under our resources heading. You know, what is our person-centred approaches here? What sort of person-centred plan have we got? Is the plan effective? Is it supporting the person with lifestyle choices as well? How useful is it? Is it making an impact? Have we explored alternative interventions that we could utilise? And I think absolutely, I know I can give a lot of different examples. So one example is where a man was being restrained repeatedly because he was declining to engage in intimate care, and he was doubly incontinent. And the staff would get to a point where they would leave him so long, sitting soiled in faeces, and at some point they would get to a stage where they would say, this is absolutely essential now. The risks now of this man developing infections, sores, etc., has now got, too high. So like some staff would wait 2 hours, some would wait 3 hours, some would wait 4 hours. But one way or the other, they would intervene at what they believed was as a last resort. They would try lots of other things. They would repeatedly come in and ask him one at a time, etc. So we took a look at his neurological report, and one of the things the neurological report said, amongst a lot of things, was that he had difficulty with the part of his brain that initiates things, which means that even though he knows he has to do something, he's not able to just get up and do it. So I suggested to one of the staff that they just say nothing. They just bring in his incontinence wear, pads, stuff for shower, his clothes, and leave them literally in a bundle sitting in front of him, and then come back in about 5 or 6 minutes and just offer him their hand, and start to pick up the items and offer him their hand. And that is how we reduced the use of physical intervention, by just giving him that space. And that's the kind of deep dive I'm talking about, you know. Another woman I know and staff again would bring her in for a bath. She would get so distressed in it. She would kick, scream and everything. And when I heard this, I said, no, you just back off. Let me figure this out. I will never ask staff to do anything that will put them at risk. I'll do it myself, but I do, just to say, I know what I'm doing, so I don't put myself at risk. So I sat well away from her, in her room at the door, and I just said to her, and again, she would have had a severe intellectual disability, so I didn't use a lot of language with her. I used a lot of eye contact, warmth, engagement, smile, and just waited until she was ready to get out of bed. And then I offered her, or I left her shampoos, conditioners in her wash bag at the side, and I just said, you know, if you want to, we can go. If you don't, we don't. And eventually she picked it up. Took a couple of hours. Eventually she picked it up. I suggested to her we went into the bathroom. I let her take the lead. I let her take me by the hand. She led me into the bathroom. Then she turned. I said, if you want, you can turn the taps on. If you don't, you don't. So it was all done during pointing and me standing back. The only thing I did was I moderated the hot and cold in the water. She sat at the side. I didn't ask her to get in. I didn't ask her to do anything. When she was ready, she got in. And that was just how we did it. And that reduced her agitation, etc. Of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, why is she getting upset in the bath? And I figured she probably has been sexually abused in it. And all of this agitation is just driving her trauma experiences as well. And later on, I asked the social worker to find out for us, you know, what was the trauma, and indeed she had been sexually abused, you know. So we absolutely need to reconsider, you know, why are people getting upset? Is there other ways that we can figure things out? We can't, and those things are just really important. By considering all of these components in the use of restriction, health providers can promote ethical, person-centred care that prioritises the safety but also the well-being and the rights of the individuals receiving support as well. Staff also need to have a number of different theories and methods that they need to consider as well. And in fact, the whole organisation does, because it's not just frontline staff, it's the multidisciplinary team, it's the wider management team as well, that should be involved in this as well. Diane, actually that's lovely, thank you for reminding me about sensory processing disorder. Absolutely, and you probably realised very straight off that Pat also had that, which of course wasn't diagnosed as well, hence the swing and the way he was taking the bread, etc. Yeah, do people know what a sensory processing disorder is as well? Sometimes you ask staff, you know, about sensory, and they know of 5 different senses. There's actually 8. And without that full, deep understanding of the 8 of them, they may not be able to figure out some of the complexities around people's behaviour as well. But trauma-informed care, do staff understand that? Can they recognise trauma in the people they're supporting? And are they able to focus on how to create safe and supportive environments for them as well? Are they trained in trauma-informed approaches? Can they help minimise the use of restraint in these situations by thinking and considering alternative strategies for supporting people with complex behaviour. Are they trained in crisis intervention? Do they have the techniques for de-escalation in these tense situations? Do they know how to do it? Have they got a good toolkit that helps them to bring people to a calmer place as quickly as possible? Sometimes the training that people get focus more on the physical aspects and less on the early stages, recognising the earlier indicators that somebody is actually distressed. Being able to recognise it, then are staff able, are they well equipped with the skills that they need to bring somebody to a calmer place in those early stages? Are they observant? Have they got the level of observation skills? Or is somebody shouting by the time they know that they're upset? So good crisis intervention skills will focus very much on communication skills, active listening, developing empathy, working in collaboration with the person, etc. Then behavioural management, actually I should change that title, I do not like it. It should be maybe behavioural support. But are staff able to draw on behavioural psychological principles to, like, do they understand things like antecedents, consequences? Do they know about stressors as well? Not just triggers, but stressors. And are they able to recognise the different types of triggers? The triggers that are most likely to cause an escalation very quickly? Do they know what causes an escalation? Because a lot of people think a trigger causes an escalation. And that is actually very wrong. That is not the case. Triggers do not cause escalation. Triggers put people in a moment where they are vulnerable to escalation, but it is not what causes it. And again, a lot of the training that staff are getting in crisis intervention doesn't focus enough in on that either. What about person-centred approaches? Does it focus on individualised care, respect for the autonomy of the person and dignity? Are staff encouraged to collaborate with the service user themselves? Do they engage with them afterwards to try and figure out what went wrong? How did it go wrong? How are they feeling about it now? Could we do something different? And just an interesting scenario that I was involved with there last year. I had the privilege of reviewing some incidences, and one of the incident reports highlighted a scenario where one of the service users came back from a home visit, walked into the house, stood for a minute, threw her coat on the floor quite aggressively, let's say, or with force, went into their bedroom, slammed the door, shouted a load of expletives at the staff. Anyway, the staff decided to knock on the door of the person and say, "What has got into you? Would you come out here please now and pick your coat up?" And with that, the service user hit the staff member. Now, I'm sure you could see an awful lot wrong in that situation there. A lot of things there that maybe would have been far more helpful in the situation. But then I asked the service user about it, and the service user said, "I had the visit from hell at home. It was awful." And this is a woman who's in care against her will, and the issue of coming home comes up in her home visits. And sometimes the family members have drink on them, and those conversations don't go very well, and they can result in quite distressing arguments and things like that. And that's what happened this day. So she came home, she stood for a minute because she hoped she was in a safe space, and all she really needed was for somebody to put their arms around her and say, "How did it go? You look it mustn't have gone well, because your face is telling me it looks terrible. Do you want to sit down and tell me all about it? And instead, the staff didn't react. They said hello to her, but they didn't pick up the non-verbal messaging that she was giving them and sending them. And then she was angry at them, so she threw the coat on the floor, and she thought, well, now you might notice. And they still didn't notice. And then she slammed the door and said, F you, because actually, in her mind, they're paid to notice. That's actually what they're there for. They're there for her, which is her view of the world, as well. And not to be doing whatever the hell else they were doing, which was getting the dinner ready or whatever. And she really was angry at them, because whatever about going home to her family, and this woman has a mild intellectual disability, she has a number of other conditions as well, which is why she is there, and why her family don't want her home, as well. But she's there for a reason, and she's very acutely aware of that, and that's what she was promised. You know, when she went in there, she was told, but you'd have people there who will look after you. And here they are not looking after her, which is why she escalated so quickly. So by integrating theories and methods into staff training and also into practice, and when we talk about practice, we talk about the whole skill set that is required for staff, from the proactive right through to the earliest, the skills to detect the earliest indication of somebody escalating, all the way through to using maybe complex interventions. Then organisations can promote a holistic and person-centred approach to supporting people with complex behaviour and minimising the use of restraint while they're doing it. So I have left a little bit of time now for questions. So would anybody like to put forward in the chat box there, or you can come off speaker as well if you wish. What I notice is I can't see you typing, so I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes, because probably nobody else could see if anyone is typing. But the last time I moved on, and then three people had typed in. But does anybody there want to, or if you want to raise your hand there and ask questions as well? Paddy, are you raising your hand there? I can see your name flashing up there.
Yeah, Martha, you mentioned the toolkit.
Yes.
Can you describe that a wee bit more? It sounds interesting and sounds like something we could use. And you said it's €140 per person. How do you get it? Or is it delivered to a person or delivered to the organisation, or what?
No, so it's online. So after this programme, we'll actually send out that I know people want the video and things like that, so we'll send it out, and in that we will have a direct link to purchase it. And then once you purchase it, you'll have access to it immediately as well. Yeah.
And is there somewhere to go to just see an overview of the toolkit? Or?
Yeah, so what we can do is we can send out an overview and then a bit more detail. So we have kind of an overview which just tells you what the 6 modules are. And then we have a more detailed, which will give you a detailed brief of the 6 modules as well. So I'll ask Sinead then to send that out with the email as well. And then you can have a full look at that, Paddy.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the way we've worked it is the senior managers really need the 6 modules, because module 6 will give them the toolkit for organisational governance. And 1 to 5 then is for like team leaders, people who are providing in supervisory roles. And then 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 is for frontline staff. Yeah. Will I be sharing? Well, we'll be sharing the video, so the video will have the slides in them, Danielle, as well. Yeah. So, yeah. Sheila then is asking, have you any advice on using PRN and what makes a PRN a restrictive practice? Yeah. You'll notice, Sheila, that HICWA have taken out chemical restraint from their talks. And I think they've done so because there's a lot of confusion about what is a restrictive practice. So, the use of a PRN medication in a scenario where somebody has a condition for which that medication is being prescribed is not a chemical restraint. Okay? A chemical restraint is something that is used for the purposes of convenience for staff or for supervision. So if somebody has an anxiety disorder and you give them Ativan because there's an exacerbation of their anxiety disorder, perhaps because of anticipatory anxiety, you know, a forthcoming event or something like that, then it is not. But a clear protocol should be in place. And one of the things that protocol absolutely should set out in detail is there any non-pharmacological alternatives we could use to avoid the use of the medication? So can we calm the environment down? Can we reassure the person? Can we, whatever, you know, can we use distraction techniques? Can we use, you know, whatever it is? And the other thing is, I think some organisations have made a very sensible decision where if somebody gets anxious, particularly if they're not able to tell and they're not verbal, that very quickly they would give a PRN paracetamol and eliminate the possibility that it is pain, so that there's no confusion about that. And then they would only resort to an anti-anxiety or an antipsychotic if the person's behaviour persisted. You know, so there are ways there that you could maybe ensure ethical kind of use of a PRN. So, yeah, okay, very good. Any other questions there? Guys, just to say as well, I mean, one of the other things, obviously you can see there, we are doing this free, and one of the things we're trying to promote is our PETMA model. And if I could just take a minute there just to tell you a little bit about PETMA. So first of all, it is the only Irish model that has BILD certification and restraint reduction network accreditation. And we were one of the first, actually, not only in Ireland but also across the UK, to actually get this accreditation. So the model is very much seen by BILD, etc., as kind of one of the forward models. You know, I think we were within the first 3 or 4 that actually crossed the line in having our model approved. So it's a very ethical model. It does differ from other models in that it very much focuses in on stressors, and primarily the stressor of somebody having an intellectual disability and what that means, etc. It focuses also very much on, it links very nicely with positive behaviour support as well. But we link our triggers as well to stressors, so people understand why somebody escalates very, very quickly. So we help people to get a deeper understanding so that they can move away from some of that superficial thinking that may go on about why somebody might escalate. So we really help people to understand where the escalation comes, what drives that anxiety, what drives that distress at that time as well. We look very carefully at interactional factors as well, and we spend a lot of time on how to detect the earliest indicators of somebody getting distressed, and then we spend a lot of time on how to bring them to a calmer place. We've lots and lots of strategies within that, and in particular, how to support somebody when they keep asking repetitive questions. And we provide 7 different ways that you can figure that out as well. We then look at functions of a person's behaviour, what it is they're trying to achieve, and we give people a kind of a framework to try and consider, why is someone getting distressed at this time. Other things then is we look very closely at the law, and in particular how we look very closely at the law as well. And we use it as a decision-making format for people as well, so that they can consider the uses of any kind of restrictive practice when somebody gets distressed. So the whole programme is very much available to organisations, and what we're looking to do is to try and train trainers within organisations. So again, this is something we're going to send out as part of the pack after the programme. So we're really hoping that people will maybe take a look at that. I know a lot of people have expressed an interest in it as well. A lot of people said no as well, because they don't really know what we were asking. So I think going forward, when we put on more of these, that we may ask a different question. But we would be really happy if you would at least look at the brochure or visit our website, which is petma.ie, and maybe start considering it as a way to reduce the use of your restrictive practices. We have a number of different programmes, but realistically the Train the Trainer programme is the one that we can probably provide to a greater number of organisations as well. But you might seriously, we would really appreciate it if you would give that some consideration. So you will get a follow-up email after this as well. So people have added there to the chat. I'm just going back into chat here to see, have I answered everything? Yeah, I think I have. If anyone has any last minute, oh wait, there's another one. Okay, that one's just come in there. So Suzanne says, can you discuss enablers versus restrictive? Example, a lap belt or a chest harness for postural management. Does this need to be written up as a restrictive practice similar to PRN? Do HICWA still want these practices written up, or are protocols for these practices enough? Well, first of all, an enabler is something that helps someone to function. So if you think about it, it facilitates the function of someone. It doesn't restrict it, it facilitates it. Yeah, guys, if you wouldn't mind, before you go, just give us a reaction to how you found the programme as well, or this. And thank you. I was looking forward to hear more about pet. Oh, that's great, Anne. Okay, yeah. And maybe just which organisation are you with there? Do you mind telling me? And Louise is saying the same. Okay, great. Lovely.
Martha,
Yes.
I'm with the safeguarding and protection team, so maybe I'm coming at this from a different angle.
Okay.
So, but I like the idea. I'm just looking it up. I like the idea of the PET model, you know, both from a disabilities and older person's viewpoint. So I'll be interested, and so will the team.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, Anne, I'll get that information out to you. Thank you. Great. Okay, oh good, we and Charlotte, I'm hoping that I could convince you to come over to be a PEPMA trainer instead. But yeah, so I was answering a question for somebody there, and oh yeah, so an enabler helps someone to function, right? So it is the opposite of a restrictive practice. Now, should you write it up? I don't know. I've seen people write it up, and that is one of the things there that kind of happens. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it kind of depends who the inspector is. Am I wrong about that? But some inspectors might ask you to write it up, and some inspectors may not ask you to write it up. So there can be a difference there in that.
Yeah, sorry, Martha, this is Suzanne who asked the question.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had mixed, like about 2 years ago, we were told, no, you don't need to write them up. We just obviously
Yeah.
have protocols for staff and they follow that. And then about a year ago, we were saying, no, we need to write them up. But the OTs are saying, no, they're to, support the functioning, to enable
Yeah.
them to stay in
Absolutely.
their seat and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of a blurred line one when it comes to what HIC we're looking for sometimes. And we've kind of just...
Look, sometimes, it's good for you to kind of like go back to HICWA when they say that and say, well, actually, no, a restrictive practice restricts the freedom of movement of a person, their freedom of will, etc. An enabler, on the other hand, promotes their independence, it promotes their ability to function, etc. So, and you have to look. Sometimes I think it's about going back to Higgo and saying, well, actually, we don't accept that. That's not actually, the way things are. Hope there isn't a Higgo inspector now here, but if there is,
Thank you.
it is important that you are able to engage with them. Like they're learning as well. So if you feel it is good practice, don't be afraid to kind of challenge them about it a little bit as well. So I hope that's all right now. Okay, Aoife saying thank you. Very helpful format for debrief, post-restriction in particular. Yeah, okay, good, Aoife. Leonie then, Leonie is the student and found it very informative. Okay, good. And again, you might consider the old PETMA as well, promote the Irish. We've a guaranteed Irish sticker on it as well. Somebody else just thank you. Enablers need to be prescribed by the OT or visit. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but there's your oversight on them as well. Great. Okay, guys, lovely. So I think, now somebody else said, in my opinion, this needs to be covered through the framework of the, you're right, actually, the mental capacity or i.e. best interest if consent can't be given. Yeah, and maybe getting an advocate in there as well. DE, I am not able to see your full message there for some reason, but you're probably gone, are you? I'm not sure how many people are left. There's still 67 people left. Diane, would you just copy your message again and put it in? Thank you, Marta. It was great. Our organisation provided training by Marta and we found it fantastic. Yes. Who is that? Oh, well done. Yes, thank you. And it was provided by me. Absolutely. Lovely. Thank you. And then pity you didn't say that sooner now when there was 100 people on. But thank you. I appreciate it because there's still about 60 something people on. So thanks a million for that. Yeah. And it made a huge difference to the organisation, didn't it? It just literally brought a calmness over the organisation, which was lovely. Yeah, which was great for everybody. Okay, somebody else is saying, during personal care, if an individual who is a wheelchair user requires 2-to-1 support for changing, but has aggressive tendency, how does the staff protect themselves without restriction if placing hand over hand is restrictive? Now, there's a complicated question. And if you were doing PETMA, I would not only tell you, I would show you. But to answer it now what I'd say to you is this, is if you're providing shower or intimate care, then that's what it is. It's an act of care. However, at the moment the person gets distressed, really you should step out of that space and just give them time to come to a calmer place and then re-engage with them if it's safe to do so. So making sure that they can sit safely and you can step away from them actually would be a really important way to set up the intimate care in the first place. Other than that, there is a way that you could provide safety to yourself, but again, from unpredictable movement, unpredictable lashing out. But there's a lot of things there you should consider. If that person has consented, why now are they suddenly getting distressed? So you might need to do a much bigger piece around that as well. Diane, here you go. Thanks, Diane, for putting it in. In my opinion, this needs to be covered through the framework of, I presume you mean the Assisted Decision Making Act, yeah, if consent can't be given. Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly which one you're responding to. Is that the enablers question there, or which question? Yeah, because it got blocked out, I couldn't see which one it was. Diane, would you mind telling me which one you are referring to? Yeah, the enablers. Yeah, 100%, absolutely. But also, I think, we need to learn to listen to people. There's a lovely book written by a guy. Sadly, he took his own life many years ago, but he was a service user himself. He had mental health difficulties, but he did not have an intellectual disability. But he wrote a book called Learning to Listen. I love it. It really informed my whole thinking, my whole perspective of supporting people with intellectual disabilities. But one of the things he would say is, if somebody is inviting something with their eye contact, or they're at peace with something, then that's them saying, yeah, I like this. This is good. And if it causes them any level of weariness, or like, it doesn't have to be full on distress, but even weariness, or, okay, well then if they're weary about it, maybe you need to approach it softer, give them a bit more time, etc. Let them feel it, touch it, play with it, get used to it, etc. before you put it on. Demonstrate it on yourself, things like that. If that can build up their willingness to give it a go as well. So there are kind of ways that you can introduce things, because if you just say, do you want it? And they say no, but there are other ways that you can build it up. And then, you want to do it in a way that doesn't cause distress. And I'm going to give you a great example. I can see there's still another 50 odd people in it. So I'm presuming some people have a bit more time to just spend, and if you want, we can. But there's a guy I worked with, and I actually trained with in one of my trainings, and we've had a lot of discussion over the years, and about different ways that we can involve people and stuff. But he's after coming up with an absolutely fantastic idea. Right, I think it was him. I'm going to give him credit for it anyway, Eamon McGrath. So he works with people with mental health difficulties, but a lot of people with intellectual disabilities go to the clinic to get their depot injections or to get bloods taken, etc. Okay, so they were a hospital, now they're a day service, day centre. So they've used one of the rooms, and the only thing that happens in that room now is somebody either gets their bloods taken or they get a depot injection. So in the room, it's a fairly big room, but as you walk through the door, even as you open the door, you will see a seat, and the seat is on a plinth. So you have to step up into the seat, which gives the right height for somebody. It has a red kind of, the runners that you might put in the centre of your table, but it has one of them fixed onto the chair. So it clearly says, and it's red. So so the chair actually says, sit on me, so the chair does the work. So what they do is they allow people who need to go for injections to go into the room. They walk around. There's various different little stress things that they can pick up if they want to, and squeeze and whatnot. But nobody, the staff who's going to give the injection doesn't enter the room until the person has actually sat on the chair. So you see, the sitting on the chair is the way the service user lets them know, I know what I'm here for because I've been here before, right? So I know what I'm here for, and now I'm ready. And it's only at that point now the staff will go in and get everything ready for the injection, and they use a little bit of lidocaine, I think, as well for the injection, or indeed to take bloods. And I think those kind of strategies are just incredibly, incredibly important. Okay, Sarah, you have said a person we support has ASD and SIB. They have PTSD, had a trauma past. They are Now, I'm not sure what 401 during intimate and personal care. They're mobile but seek staff hands to steady themselves. When receiving nutrition or medication via PEG, they'll become aggressive, bite, harm staff if they're not put into a restrictive hold, potentially due to the years they've been held almost 24 hours a day. We've tried sensory integration, TAC pack. I've heard of the TAC pack, yeah. Peanut roller, deep tissue massages in times of transition. Any suggestion on reducing the levels of restriction or alternatives to hold that they are communicating that they want. It's difficult because it is a restriction, but they're communicating that they want the hold. Oh my God, you're using 4 staff? Is that correct? Have I got that right, Sarah? There's 4 staff involved? Yes. Oh wow. Oh wow. That's a lot. That's a lot. You know, that's a very, very complex question. And obviously you know it is, because look at all you've already tried and everything. Like, I don't know if, I mean, maybe that's about doing a more deeper dive, kind of a consultation with you. You know, sometimes I do that. I will literally go through absolutely every single report that's written, look at incidences, talk to staff, talk to the service user, you know, to try and figure out exactly what is going on and how to help them using much less restrictive stuff. But could I answer that for you now in a couple of sentences? No, definitely not. But I definitely could in a much bigger way. And that's not touting for business or anything like it, because in fact, straight away I'm even panicking that I'm thinking, even if you wanted it, when could I do it? But yeah, it's too big a question. Yeah, but look, go back and use absolutely everything there that we have gone through now. Maybe as well consider, you know, buying that 6-pack, you know, the training, the online stuff. And see then, can you use that like an investigative tool to review and seriously consider whether or not you have been using the right strategies, or, you know, so there's a couple of different things there that you could do as well. Okay, Georgina, you're asking me, what about physical restriction, using bookies for teenage adults who drop to ground to refuse when school setting? Okay, so, oh, you're using the bookie for a teenager because they drop to the ground to refuse when in school setting, but can walk or run, and they have an intellectual disability. They show no distress getting into the buggy, but have learnt that their only way of getting out of classroom or outside is to sit into the wheelchair to tell carers, I want to go out. It is, yeah, it is, yeah. Oh, you see, you've kind of taught him now how to get out, and he's learned how to do it in a way that affects his. Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, like, I've done a lot of work in schools, and some kids, anxiety absolutely paralyzes them. To the point where they can't come into school even. Look, again, I would go back there and maybe re-look at everything, you know, and like, you've taught him how to get out when he needs to, but you're possibly not seeing the reasons why he was dropping to the ground, and, you know, which would be far more helpful to him as well, because one of the things you really want to strike a balance between is not only how do we manage someone's behaviour, but how do we get them back involved in the curriculum, you know, in the educational side of things. I don't know, it's another very complex question. And again, I would suggest that more training is absolutely required to really unpack all of that and look at it very, very differently. Guys, I guess the level of complexity of these questions, there's no way I'm going to be able to answer them like in a couple of minutes. But again, I will say to you, maybe purchase that pack. It's designed for schools as much as it is for any other organisation. But also re-look at all of this. You know, you're going to get the video of it as well. So, you know, go through it. Maybe sit down with your staff group and say, look, are we actually ticking all of these boxes? And I don't mean ticking the box as in, but are we doing things to the depth that we should be doing them? And the risk of the route, yeah, it has been reduced from 7 to 4. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping, Sarah, you didn't think there was some magic little formula there that I could just click my fingers, you know, for you, because it wouldn't say an awful lot about how you got to where you've got to if there was a simple little answer. Yeah. Okay, Charlotte. And hopefully we'll chat soon because you want to do PETMA trainer. Okay. That's just saying. Okay, who is this SH? Sally. Okay, hi Sally. So what do you do if one of the residents you support was admitted to a general hospital and when you visited them they were wearing gloves, taped on to stop them removing lines, etc.? I consider this to be a restrictive, but are the general hospital allowed to do this for medical purposes? Well, unless you could teach them another way. I mean, if he's left in hospital on his own and, you know, it's a lot to expect the general hospital to be able to provide support to somebody who's going to pull out the lines. And I think sometimes the disability services forget they still have a duty to care for that person. And they can't just pass it over to a general hospital that is there to provide services to people who are sick. That's what they're there for. They don't have time to sit with somebody, etc. So, like, the disability services can't wash their hands of the person and just visit them. If the person is likely to pull things out, then the disability services probably should be providing one-to-one support with that person. But I don't know what else the healthcare team could do in a situation like that. Yeah, probably maybe more consideration if somebody needs to go to hospital. You need to be thinking about what level of support do they actually require? What are the risks? What's likely to happen when they're in there? You know, and to do a whole risk assessment around that. And if it wasn't predictable that they were going to have lines in, you were going to learn very quickly that they were going to, and then to do your risk assessment about, well, how do we provide them with ongoing support during this time? Yeah. Georgina then said, we're working on this, however, it's hard for family school to accept its restriction. Yeah. Georgina, that's probably why more team, you know, thinking and training is involved. Is it required? Yeah. Sarah said, really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. I have to go to another meeting, but we'll look into the training. Thanks, Marta. You're very welcome, Sarah. Georgina, we've done this and recommended supporting him and not recommending buggy. It's how to help school family change perspective. You mean, Georgina, you've already done training and they're still doing that? Okay. Okay, you're welcome.
Sorry, yes, they are, Martha. And I suppose that's part of the issue is that because it works for them, like you can look at the quality of life issue and that's what they're looking at, but they're not looking at this is a fully ambulant person and it's down to activities and expectations and how to support him to manage things he finds difficult, but they're finding it very hard because it's a quick solution and they've done it for years. But it's they can't. I suppose what I was asking really was and we do feel it's a restrictive practice and you're saying it is a restrictive practice from your experience.
Yeah.
How do you get the penny to drop for schools and families? Is there anything in particular so that they can understand why you're asking them to
Well, to be
slowly
honest with you,
help them.
even module 1 of our 6-part online program would help them to understand that.
Can
Now, it won't-
families do it?
Yeah,
Can they sign up
absolutely,
for it?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Now, it's not going to help. It's not going to teach them alternative things because
No, we can
that's
do
module.
that.
Yeah, that's module 4, by the way. Oh, if I meant to say that module 4 is a alternative.
Yeah. And we've been doing that, but the piece is I suppose it's the acceptance in order to support the change of practice and understanding of why
Yeah,
they're going and
exactly.
changing what works well for them now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, listen, good luck with it, Georgina. It sounds like you have your hands full.
Sure, don't we always?
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, and Claire says, thanks, Marta. Your presentation has been helpful and inspiring. Oh, thank you. And reinforcing the need to examine the role of Human Rights Committee in the service. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. And thank you for the training. It was really interesting. Oh, you're very welcome, guys. Yeah. So look, as I said, we will follow things up with you. I can still see there's 29 people still left in the room. I don't know if any of you want to ask anything else there. But most of the text is coming through now are just people saying thank you. But if you did have any last questions, no, people are starting to drop out now. Okay, great. Okay, guys, well, look, I will also finish it up now. It has been recorded. We'll do a little bit of editing on it, and then we will get it out to you. Okay? All right, thank you. Good, I'm glad people found it interesting now. Great. Thank you, webinar has been very informative and supported. Great, lovely. Thank you, it was very interesting. Great.